Hi, everybody. Today I'm going to show you how you can use the Artspeak language to do cool plots on your Nibble IMSAI 8080 on the Tektronix. Artspeak was a language written in 1970 by Jack Schwartz at NYU. Mostly kids used to use it because they didn't know how to do the kind of math that Artspeak does for you, and it was really cool. Um, you actually had to program it on punch cards for a computer called the CDC 6600, one of Cray's early mainframes, supercomputers, and would plot on a 10-inch by 10-inch printer. The language kind of disappeared after the 80s. There's really no sign of it anywhere, so I actually rewrote it in Python and created a web page because I found I had the manuals for it. This is the early manual, and then there was a later manual, and I had them all. So I just decided to rewrite it so that people could play with it. And the way I wrote it, it creates a PNG file. But in the last couple of weeks, I've been working on a Tektronix plot output generator, and it seems to work okay. So I figured I'd show it to you guys. The IMSAI 8080 is really important to me. It was kind of my origin story back in 1975, how I got interested in computers, just seeing how cool it looked. In fact, when I was a consultant for the producers of the movie War Games, I actually suggested that they use the IMSAI 8080 for something. They just asked me, like, how did you get into computers? And I said, oh, this IMSAI 8080 was so cool. That's how I got into it. And then they used it. I don't think I would have used it the way they used it, but it's certainly cool that they did. So let me show you a little bit about Artspeak first. It's a very simple language. I'd say it's probably based on BASIC. Um, the most simple program I have here is just one that says let C1, and C stands for curve, be circle with the center at 5, 5, radius 1. And there's a reference guide at the top here, but the way it works is everything is just like in old Artspeak based on a 10-inch by 10-inch. So 5, 5 would be the middle of the screen. You can put floating point numbers in here, so you could do 5.5 also. But and then the next line says draw C1, so it'll actually draw the curve or the circle in this case. So if I click on Run Artspeak, you can see that it actually draws a circle at 5, 5 with a radius 1. Very, very simple, very straightforward. I also have this toggle here for graph lines. Obviously, that one had graph lines. You can turn it off, and there'll be no graph lines. For the Tektronix functionality, it never does graph lines, so you don't have to worry about that. Here's a little bit more complicated program showing off some more of the syntax here. You can actually have point variables. So P1 is 3, 3, P2 is 3, 7, et cetera, et cetera. And then I have a curve, which is actually line that goes from P1, P2, P3, P4 back to P1. This is a square. And then you can have labels. So this is label 1. So at label 1, it draws that square, and then it expands that square from point 5, which is the center of the square, by a factor of 0.98. So it's actually shrinking the square when it runs this by 2% approximately. And then this line says rotate the square about that same point in the center by 3 degrees. And then this line is kind of the loop functionality. It says repeat L1 to L2 60 times. So I don't know if you have an idea what that's going to do, but I'll show it to you now. It's a really cool one. I can show you side by side what this looks like, just so you can follow along. Um, and that's kind of what I described that it would do. So why don't we do this again, but actually generate a Tektronix file. I'll do it with the circle first. Pretty simple one. I'm going to click on Tektronix plot. It'll ask me to save the file. I'll call this one circle. It saved it. So I'm just going to, I got tired of waiting for Kermit to transfer files, 15 minutes and stuff. So I wrote a script to do it using a diskette and CPM tool. So I'll show you the program here. Then I will run it to transfer circle. Then it's over there. So I will go back to the IMSAI. I can do plot e colon circle.plt, do dash C so it clears the screen at the beginning. Very straightforward. Works nicely. Let's try something a little more complicated. Go back to the squares. Save that as squares. Transfer it. Should be there. So we'll do plot e colon squares. There you have it. Now, I noticed that my plots are a lot slower than the sample ones. So that's because when I draw things like circles and curves, I'm doing one point at a time instead of taking advantage of the polyline functionality. Um, so I looked up, there's something called the Raymer-Douglas-Heuker algorithm. So I have a little checkbox so you can use that. And also one thing to note is, of course, that the Tektronix is not 1,000 by 1,000. It's 1024 by 780. So I have an option here to scale it to 780 by 780, so it's square, and it'll put things in the middle. So let's try the circle again with the RDP algorithm and the scale to 780 780. Just click on the Tektronix plot. Call this one circle R for the RDP algorithm. Over to transfer. Back to the IMSAI. Save a little time here. You can see it drew that circle a lot faster than the old one, but it's obviously more jagged. So you can kind of decide for each one. Like for the squares, it doesn't matter because it's using polylines anyway, but for things with curves, you have to decide if you want to trade off waiting for it to plot for jagged lines. So let's go back to Artspeak. I want to show you, before I show you some more complicated stuff, about a construct in Artspeak called actual curves. So you can let a variable be a curve, and you give it four parameters. The start of the curve, oops, an imaginary point, the end of the curve, and a curve factor. What that is, so you have the start of the curve at 2, 1, and the end of the curve at 4, 1, and then you have an imaginary point at 3, 4, and then the curve factor is between 0 and 1, and it's the amount of stretching you want to do towards the imaginary point. in the middle of the curve. So let's just do this. Draw C1. So let's see what this looks like. Oops, spelled B wrong. Try that again. Okay, so here's what we did. It's starting at, well, let me do a side by side to look at it. We started at 2, 1, which is right here. And we went to 3, 4. And then the imaginary point, sorry, we went to 4, 1. The imaginary point's at 3, 4. And the middle of this curve is stretching up towards 3, 4. And since it's 0.5, it gets as far as halfway there. So, you know, if we change the curve factor, we can do some cool things. So let's try this. X is a type of variable that's just a constant. Start at 0.9, make a point at 2, 1, make a point at 4, 1, make another point make a line label here, L1, let C1 be curve B1, imaginary point P3, endpoint P2 factor X1, and then draw it. Then we're going to reduce X1 by 0.1. And we'll repeat that 8 times. So that'll go from 0.9 all the way down to 0.1. So let's try that. You can see all the different curve factors. It almost gets up to the imaginary point there, and it almost gets flat when it's at 0.1. If we change this 8 times to 9 times, that'll actually get a curve factor of 0. So you should see at the bottom an actual straight line. If we do it 10 times, then you'll actually get a curve factor of negative 0.1. You kind of get like a dunce cap 3D effect here. Let's send this to the Tektronix. Call this dunce. That works nicely. Probably should have done this one in RDP and scaling. Oh, we did. Let's try that without it to see how that would look. Much slower, but a lot smoother. I know there's probably a way to do this more quickly. I'm already using reduced um, point descriptors in there, but I see those other plat files be a lot quicker. I'm not really sure how. maybe somebody can help me with that. Um, Let me go back to Artspeak. Um, so another thing we have here is you can actually publish what you draw here. So if I go to what people have done before, you can see all kinds of cool stuff and you can see the code. Um, One of them is one I did recently, which kind of looks like the 04.plot that comes with the firmware. Um, Here's the code, copy it, paste it in here, just make sure it works. Pretty similar. Let's do this with the RDP and the scale. We'll call this bottom 4. Still much slower, even though it's using the RDP algorithm, but it looks pretty good. I'll actually plot the real one here. Maybe it's a little more jagged. I don't know. I could increase the compression, so to speak, in RDP, but I kind of like where it is. Let's go back to the user published programs. Um, Take a look at this starfish looking one. I like this. It's sort of 4 circles, and then you have these imaginary points on the 4 corners of the screen, and you have a loop here that expands, which is really reducing the circles from each of the points by 0.95. So it's making them a little smaller, draws them, and then it actually changes those imaginary points, reduces them by 0.99. It does this 100 times. Let's just run it quickly. Do it 100 times, so it takes a little bit longer. That's what it does. Go back to the home page, paste that in. Definitely want to do this using RDP and scale because it would go off the screen. And we'll plot it. Still going through the same 100 calculations to make the file. Call this one star. Cool. Go back to some more of these user published ones. I like this moire pattern here. It's drawing a bunch of lines and moving them around. Cool. You don't need the RDP because these are just lines. Let's look at a couple more that I think are cool. Oh, this one I like. So this is two different squares that are rotated against the center. Looks like it's hard to believe there are no curves in here. These are just squares, but I like this one. Quick one. Just a couple more. Like this kind of spirograph one using curves only. So you got a curve from 5, 5 to 7, 5 with an imaginary point at 6, 11, which is not even on the screen, which you could do because as long as your curve factor isn't at 1, you're not gonna go off the screen. Um, I'm actually drawing. Actually, I have a stop in there, which is just funny because you usually don't need stop. I could have put this L1, L2 above the repeat, but anyway, I put it after and I put a stop in the code so it doesn't do it again. Um, so it's just going to rotate these curves about the center at 6 degrees. And it's going to do that 60 times, equals 360. Check it out. Right. So definitely want to use the RDP on this. Well, we'll try it both ways. Works. Let's try it with without the RDP. Much slower, but much smoother. Anyway, if you'd like to play with this, you can go to artspeak.quogic.com. That's Quogic. And you can try some of the ones on there. You can make your own, download the plot files, and if something's really cool, you should definitely publish it so everybody can take a look. There's another operand in Artspeak that I probably should have shown. I'll do a quick one when this is done. this Python version of Artspeak I wrote for calculating these curves. It uses something called NURBS, NURBS. I wrote this interpreter, I don't know, it's at least 15 years ago now. Okay, that's finally done. Just want to quickly show, let's go back to the simple circle that I'm going to add this caption command. Yeah, so caption just takes a starting point and then text, and it uses the Tektronix alpha mode. If you make a Tektronix plot, quickly do that, call it text. Right? Easy. In fact, I taught Grok how to do Artspeak, and it made a few things. It put text in all of them. The first thing it did was this abstract curved spiral. It put a caption at the bottom. Then I asked it to make a picture that imagines what it thinks life is like on the outside, and it made this one. Obviously, you can plot all these on the Tektronix, but I just figured I'd show them to you. Then I asked it for an alien world. It did this crazy thing. Then I asked it to put creatures on the ground in the alien world. So anyway, that's kind of interesting. So again, artspeak.quadric.com, and let me know what you think. Feel free to put something in the comments.